Welcome to the Unlock Podcast, an innovative approach towards human development. My name is Amanda, and today I'm joined by Susan Banda-Mudiwa, who's a professional ICF certified coach, strategic leader, consultant, strategic communications consultant, board director, and Unlock associate. Susan, welcome, and would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Amanda. I'm so pleased to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. My name is Susan Banda-Mudiwa, as you said. I am from Malawi, but married to a Zimbabwean, and we live in Nairobi, Kenya. I am a coach and have been an executive and leadership coach since 2018. I have coached people from all around the world, leaders in various fields, both from the corporate sector as well as from the development sector.
That is so amazing, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. Well, technically, I met you a year ago when you were hosting our fabulous Unlock launch event. So yes,
Yeah.
it's been a minute.
Thank you.
So yes, so today Susan is joining us to talk about inclusive leadership. So let's begin by defining what does it mean to be an inclusive leader. These are individuals who are aware of their own biases, but beyond that, they actively seek out and consider different perspectives to inform their decision-making process and collaborate in a much more effective ways with others. Biases are tendencies, inclination, or prejudices that affect our judgment and decision-making processes. They can be conscious or unconscious and are often based on our personal experiences, beliefs, and cultural norms. So it's highly important to be aware of our biases and make conscious efforts to overcome them in order to create a more equitable and inclusive society. So with all that said, let me leave it to Susan to deep dive in how to navigate inclusive leadership. So Susan, what does inclusive leadership mean?
Wow, Amanda, that definition pretty much covers it. It's about understanding as a leader that you do come to that position with your own inherent biases, as we all do, whether it's about our background, our culture, how we've been brought up, socialized, etc. All of those come into play when you think about the biases and prejudices that we come with to the workplace. In my estimation, in my own definition, inclusive leadership is about embracing differences. It's about harnessing the differences to achieve an objective, achieve a goal. And if it's an organization, it's about how do we work together as teams to achieve the targets that we've set for ourselves. If you look into the development space, it's about how do we bring about a change to the communities in which we're working. And that's my definition. So as a leader, you come to that understanding that you have your own biases. Indeed, your team members as well have their own biases as well. But that is not a negative. Do we then embrace all of that and put it all together in order to make the changes to meet the targets that we need to?
So thank you for sharing that, like your definition, because it's true that like this is, I said like a very generic one, but it's also important for you to include your experience and how you have, personally lived it. So what can it look like? What does it look like an inclusive leadership environment?
So when you have an inclusive leader, I think one of the main traits of an inclusive leader is one who's curious, one who's inquisitive. What are those differences? And how do I then harness them together? How do I bring all these differences together? If I take an example right now, in this world that we're in, you might find workplaces where there's 4 different generations. You've got baby boomers who are still there. You've got Generation X, you've got millennials, then you've got Generation Z. And all of these are coming to the table with different perspectives, different values, and different needs in terms of what they're doing, how they're working in that organization. So as a leader, being curious about all of those different needs is important. In addition, there's a need to be empathetic towards all the people in your workplace, all the members of your team. So that is a curiosity and empathy that goes beyond seeing the person as they are, seeing them beyond the position that they hold, and understanding what's bringing them to work for your organization, what's driving them to work for your organization. And then again, what are their needs? How can the organization also fulfill their needs, their goals? Because now we understand that those who are coming into the workforce are not just about the bottom line, getting a check at the end of the month. They're also looking at the purpose of the organization, the values of the organization, and do those align with their own purposes and values? And so as a leader, I need to understand that. What's driving you? What's important to you? And is the organization also leaning into those purposes, leaning into those values that the team members have? Another trait that I think is also quite important for inclusive leaders is one of humility. Humility, because we must understand that we don't always know it all. You know, in the past, there used to be this command and command culture, that the leader knows it all. The leader is the one who's going to drive the organization. But now there's a sense that, you know, with all the changes that are happening in the world, whether it's driven by technology or driven by things like the pandemic, how does a leader then lead effectively? And being humble and being of a humble mind to ask questions, to understand that I don't know it all. Maybe someone else in the organization knows more than I do about X. So being able to go out and ask the questions, not always being the one first, the one who's first to address an issue, perhaps bringing different voices to the table and encouraging those different voices to be heard, to be spoken, and to speak about the issues that affect the organization. So humility in this age that we're in is very important in the leader. The agility. I mean, we've talked about agility in the context of the pandemic and changes that are happening. So a leader must be able to, within the context of humility, also be able to be agile. And that agility is through, again, asking what needs to be done. What are the changes that we need to make, and being able to pivot quickly in order to continue to drive the organization forward.
Yeah, well, 2020 was definitely the year of learning and unlearning for
Yes.
especially for leaders that were handling the situation very abruptly, that nobody saw it coming, right? And it was kind of like readapting the whole model to work in a digital environment, which nobody really had much experience with, and well, finally made it thrive. Obviously, before Unlock, when we were eCoach Pro, we also had a digital environment going on. So our transition was very different than the rest of the world, but most of the industries got into a lot of hiccups, like trying to move forward the organization, especially in that sense. Also, you mentioned like the differences in the generations. A lot of people used to measure their work for the compensation, the monetary compensation, but now people are also thinking about the emotional compensation that you get within the organization, and that's also something very, very connected and aligned to the empathy that you also mentioned.
Oh, yeah. So I was just going to say, yes, the issues around wellness and mindfulness within the workplace are also very important and are coming forth. People are saying, if I go to work, do I have the opportunity to maybe take a rest, go and sit down somewhere? Do I need to come into work every single day? Maybe I can work from home because I need some breaks. Those are all things that the new workforce now, the labor force now, especially after the pandemic, is looking at. So opportunities for companies to provide, yes, a wellness space, a mindfulness space as well.
So how can we enable these inclusive environments that we are here mentioning? How would you say we can best enable them?
I think it's for leaders and even those who are not leaders to start to talk about what the needs are, to talk about what kinds of leadership they want to see. And we see that when you look at the millennials and younger ones who maybe are not, compared to baby boomers who would stay and work for, all their lives, all their work life. Now they're jumping from one job to the next because they're looking for purpose. They're looking for values that align with themselves, with their own values. They're looking for spaces that cater to their well-being, whether it's emotional or physical well-being. So as leaders, we need to start thinking, what are we doing to include all of those needs? What are we doing to meet those needs? And to be open to having the discussions and having those conversations.
So from your experience, how can you say your awareness of inclusive environments has changed, like early in your career versus today?
Yeah, I think that there's been quite a change. And when I first started out, and this is going to age me, but when I first started working as a young reporter, right out of college, it was, it was back home in Malawi. Issues around inclusiveness, etc., were not ones that we discussed. Okay, but come to being CEO of an agency, I then had to put together a team and was in charge of a team that brought together people from different backgrounds, not just about age. There was age issues. There was the fact that some of them were coming from a private sector background, others from a development NGO background. And we all had to come together in this space to work on a project that was, yes, sort of rooted in NGOs, but had a private sector mentality to it. And so bringing those differences to join, to get everybody to work as a team and to buy into the idea, the vision, the mission that we had. It took a while. I must say that there were some instances when it was difficult. And I certainly had to put on different hats and open my mind to, how everybody was engaging with this particular project. So I would say the biggest lesson for me was being mindful, first of all, of the differences, but also being open to having the discussions and driving the change as well. So in terms of humility, I had to be the first one to be humble and understand that this was about power, the power sector. My background is in communications. I had to learn as much as I could. So how did I learn? By asking questions and getting those who had the experience and who had the skills and the background to inform me and help me achieve my goals as CEO as well. So the change that I saw was being open to those differences, to the different backgrounds, the different experience, but willing to learn as well and learning from my colleagues in the organization.
Wow. Yeah, especially because you have worked in different sectors, you have worked in different countries, you work internationally. So you can have a broader perspective on like the kind of openness that you also need, whether it's the cultural differences or race or any single bias that people come with to work, and then you develop from there. So I'm pretty sure you've seen yourself grow throughout the year. Because that is not something that you learn overnight. And
absolutely. Yes. And I like to think that having worked in different markets in different countries, and I was able to bring a different perspective, shall I say, to the project that we're working on, and indeed to my work now as an executive and leadership coach. I think that helps, but also the curiosity. I think for me, the curiosity is important and being willing to learn.
Yeah. No, for sure. It always reminds me of that speech that Steve Jobs gave, that one of the highlights was stay curious.
Yes,
If you stay
yes, stay
curious,
curious.
you will. Yeah, always, always,
Yeah,
always hits.
yeah, yeah.
So now that we've covered what inclusion looks like in leaders and
Mhm.
environments, I want to ask you, how does it differ from feminist leadership?
Hmm. I think there's not too much of a difference with feminist leadership, but I wanted to point out a few things. ActionAid did come up with some principles of feminist leadership that I think speak to some of the differences. One is that with feminist leadership and women leaders, the biggest thing is that our egos are kept in check, right? So you lead with empathy, open minds, and so you accept, people's differences, you accept the vulnerabilities, their vulnerabilities, the people that you're working with, as well as your own, right? And then you recognize and value the strengths of other people. And like I said, you might know that other people know things more than you do. So be willing to go out and ask the questions, being willing to learn from others. There's also issues around self-care and caring for others. So how are you taking care of yourself? And I know in a lot of leaders, issues around work-life balance come up. How do I ensure that I am devoting as much time to my family or myself as I am for other people and for work? And so this means that we need to take care of our own emotional and physical well-being so that we all have those sources of inspiration, our inner sources of inspiration and compassion, so that those can come to the fore as we continue to give of our best. I mean, it's obvious when you're tired and stressed, then you're unable to take care of others. You're unable to give 100% of your effort in the workplace. Yeah. So as you take care of yourself and you're practicing self-care, it's also important to encourage others to do the same. So in your team, ensuring that people are not burnt out, they are taking the rest that they need, and they're not stressing themselves so that they can't work and contribute to the work. Um, Another aspect of feminist leadership has to do about inclusion. How do we include everybody? Making sure that everyone is heard equally, everybody is respected, and everybody is successful in meeting their own individual goals as well as the organization's goals. So we will build, as feminist leaders, build inclusive and diverse teams. And when we see that there are participation barriers to participation, we will work to dismantle those to ensure that everybody is included. Another point that women leaders have made, and this has been in discussions that I've had with them, as well as reading some of the literature out there, has to do about how do we create space for others to lead. So we are willing to build trust and empower others, empower our colleagues, empower team members to share the leadership space in reaching the goals that we have set for the organization. And we trust those who are leading, and we trust them that they will guide us so that we can achieve the mission that we have for the organization and for the agency. In addition, feminist leaders also, according to ActionAid, are very clear, timely, and transparent in how they make their decisions. So you consult people, you consult team members, you consult outside of the organization as well. And you ensure that those choices promote the values that you have for the organizations, as well as being able to communicate decisions and the reasons for how you made those decisions with team members so that everybody can get on board. And that's how inclusive leadership, I think, sort of dovetails with feminist leadership, because feminist leadership leads from a position of empathy, collaboration, and also curiosity as well.
Wow. So nice how you combined, inclusive leadership and also added, feminist leadership, which kind of summarizes as the need to have these characteristics of being an empathic leader, to have or to own, humility, to learn to be humble, and to accept that you don't know you don't know it all, and sometimes you don't know best, and that is okay. We need to be very open to understand and to accept that there's an infinite world of knowledge out there, and if one person knew it all, well, then would all be doomed, right? So
Right.
kind of summarizing almost what you just mentioned, or what you just said, was that, well, feminist leadership is very, very similar to like the definition that you originally gave about inclusive leadership, sorry, which is in general just embracing differences, right? And having that humility to be able to open the space up for other people, to allow them to lead as well, and have positions of leadership regardless of their actual position within the organization. You also mentioned that curious leaders are very important, because that way we can be on continuous betterment, for sure. And this also benefits being focused on what are the needs, not only of the organization itself, but also the individuals that make that organization, which is the most important people that should be happy and complacent, right? That everything is running accordingly. You also talk about being mindful. So being mindful is very important, right? And being open to these discussions and starting this discussion, and accepting that sometimes it's okay to take one step back and let others take that step forward, even if they don't feel like it's their place. And last but not least, to empower yourself, essentially, is how I gather this. I don't know if our listeners are gonna gather this the same, but kind of empower yourself throughout your vulnerabilities. And this is something more connected to the feminist leadership, but I also want to think that it's also very important for every inclusive leader to add to their practice, in the sense that if you empower, like, I love this quote. I'm very big on quotes. So I love this quote that says, once you own your flaws, nobody can use them against you. So it's kind of like, instead of showing it as a weakness, you can show it as a strength, because you own, like, it's how they say, it's a scar, it's no longer a wound. So it's you've already let that sense of self-awareness that you have to be embarrassed of it, but you rather empower yourself through it. Would you like to add anything additional to my very short summary of the things that you just shared with us today?
Yeah, that's a great summary. And just talking about vulnerability as well, I believe that vulnerability almost requires you to be brave and courageous, in the sense that if you're open and are, as you said, owning your flaws, sorry, when you own your flaws and you show your flaws and see them as a strength, people then can see that as a strength. And people are probably going to see you as more human, shall we say? Because sometimes as a leader, you can seem to be up there where you're untouchable and you just keep going, nothing touches you. But when you are open to being vulnerable and are courageous in that vulnerability, then that's a huge strength. That's a strength, because people see you as human, but also it encourages others to open up to you as well. So where in the past people may not have been able to come to you and talk about certain things and certain things going on in the organization, you're seen as approachable, and they'll come and talk to you. Yeah. So it's I as you said, there's great similarities between feminist leadership and inclusive leaders as well. I think the traits are the same pretty much. And it's about, understanding that none of that takes away from your ability to lead. And it's not a weakness if you are empathetic, if you are vulnerable, if you do if you are humble and showing humility and asking others for information, asking others to teach you something new as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a very, very well connected saying that I also mentioned in the podcast that's connected to this one, which is the Women in Leadership, which is essentially to teach by being, right? If you teach
Yes.
people
Yes.
kind of like you open the space, you create a psychological safety space for them to come to you, and you make them feel like they can trust you, they will come forward.
Yeah.
And if you don't
Yeah.
show these traits as a leader, well, you're essentially telling them, you know, this is the barrier that I'm setting, so that you don't get to cross here. So that's very important to keep in mind as well. Oh, Susan,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today. I am very happy how this conversation turned out. I was very much looking forward to it, especially because we are following up, right, with the types of leadership as well that we should be looking forward in different organizations. Would you like to add anything else? Any comments?
No, thank you very much, Amanda, for the opportunity. I've enjoyed the discussion as well, and we'll continue to read up on leadership and those leadership traits, and as I have discussions with leaders in my work as a coach. So, I mean, Unlock is doing so much work with with leaders around the world in different sectors. And so this is a discussion that will be ongoing. And as we learn new things, as research is done, we'll make that available to our leaders as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Amanda.
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have more time, or else we could dive into, you know, case studies or more in-depth
Yes,
content. But
absolutely. Yes.
this is our bite-sized information, our bite-sized podcast. And well, we are very happy to have had you today, Susan. Thank you so much for accepting the invite. Always remember that you can find more information on leadership or anything regarding learning and development from unlock.org. That's unloq.org. And to our listeners or viewers, stay tuned as we continue to unlock human potential.